Hey, this is Professor Homa. Welcome to CSE 235. We're working with JavaScript, and we're going to just create a simple tip calculator in order to show some operations, to do some math, some multiplication, and to run a function, and also to go over some variables. A couple things we'll do with this, and I'll try to run it through as I'm doing it. It may vary a little bit from the sample because I'd rather just kind of do it logically as I go through it, and then if I encounter errors, I encounter errors just to try to help you work through it. So this is the final product here. So if I had a $40 meal and I entered it in this top field, I could hit this button that says calculate tip, and what it's going to do, it's going to calculate 20%, because that's what I have set up. It's 20% of 40 for a standard tip, and then it adds it together in the bottom. So 3 text fields, 1 button, and there's basically 4 kind of paragraphs of text here. So there's not a lot going on here as far as visually, so it shouldn't be that hard. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the value, someone's going to enter this in, so we're going to have to take the value of this text area and then multiply it by 0.20 and then display that in this text box, and then take the value of this and add it back to that. So it's just a little math. We did it before with alert boxes, but now we're going to do it with text fields. So going back to brackets, what I'm going to do is I already have the HTML started. It looks like this. Here's my version. It looks like this. So I'm just going to put in my text fields. And again, these have default lengths on them, but we're not going to worry about all the form elements right now. But one thing I am going to do is I'm going to put an input, and the type is text. And that should be in quotes. And we're going to put 2 things. We're going to put a name, and the name is always going to be the same as the ID. We're not really going to use the name right now, but we're going to put it in. We're going to get used to using it because we're going to use it in the future. So we're going to get used to using a name and an ID. So the name for the first one, I'm just going to call meal, and then I'm going to put an ID called meal. And that's our first text box, but you want to make sure that you close it off. So it's self-closing. It has the slash and the closing bracket. And if I save this and take a look at it, I'll refresh this, and there it is. And I could just copy and paste this for the other 2 for the total, and I'll change the names. This one I'll change to tip and tip for both the name and ID, and this one I'll call total for both the name and ID. So I have my boxes here, and also I'm going to put a button here. And there's different ways you could do the button. I'm just going to use button because W3 school used button, but I'm going to put in a button, and I'll do ID equals, and I'll give it a name because we're going to have to identify the button. And then I'll close that off, and then inside here I'm going to put what it says on the button. So I'm just going to put calculate tip. I'll put that in all caps. Make sure I spell it right. So there's calculate tip. So I should have all the visuals in here. I'll remove the extra space. And actually I don't need a space here, and let's just see what it looks like before I do anything. And there you can see this is on one line. So I'm going to put a p tag, and I'll put a closing paragraph. I'll save that, refresh it. Okay, now it looks like the way I want it to look. Here's my original sample. Here's the one I'm working on. So everything visually set up. Okay, so we have our 3 input text boxes, and we have our text. So we have all our HTML done. This is all in the body. Also notice there's a style set up here, an inline style, not an inline style, but an internal style sheet that's in the head tag that basically just says margin 60. So it just puts a margin around what we're working on, and you could certainly do more with that to make it look nicer. But let's start on the JavaScript, and I'm going to just write a function, and I'll call it tip calc because that's kind of what we're doing. And everything I could put in this, so I'll put my open and closing parentheses, and then I'll put my brackets, and everything we do is going to be inside here. Now also, I could do this right away, but inside the button, this is called inline JavaScript, and there's different ways to do this, but this is the simplest to start. Inside the button here, the button ID, I'm also going to do an on-click. So this is putting the JavaScript inside the button, and like I said, it's called inline because it's done inside the HTML. But I'm just going to put the function in here, tip calc, and it goes in the quotes, and you do also have to put the parentheses in there. So I think that's okay. On click equals, I forgot the equals in there. That's why it was showing up with a red color, and I think everything's okay. So I'm going to go here and check it out, refresh it. Now I can't do anything yet, but my button's going to work. So like I said, we have the function set up ready to go, and I'm going to write some variables. So I'm going to do the first one. The variable is going to be meal. So I'm going to do variable meal equals. Now what I'm going to do for meal, instead of just saying equals whatever, it's going to be the value of whatever this box is. So I have to do document dot get, I can just start this off here, dot get element by ID, and the ID that I'm going to use is going to be meal. So I'm going to get that, but I also have to put dot value, because we're not just getting the document, we're getting the value of what gets entered in there. So this is very important that you put the dot value in there. And I'm going to put a semicolon to finish it off. So that's my first variable. And then I'm going to put a variable for tip. And this should be an easy one, because we're basically going to take meal, and then we're going to multiply it by 0.20. And we could adjust this later to if we want to put some different types of tips in there, but right now we're just going to put that. So that's going to take whatever we put in for the meal and multiply it by 0.20 to get our tip amount. And if we want to display our tip amount, we could do document dot get element by ID, and I'm going to put it in the tip text area. So this is where it's going to display document.get element by ID tip, and we're going to make it be the value because we're still dealing with values here, and the value is going to equal tip. So the tip that we figure out now should display in here. So that should display the tip in here, and I'm going to save this, and I'll just try it out and see what happens so far. So I'll refresh this, and I'll put an amount 123. I'll calculate tip, and there it is, 24.6, and it looks like it's working. Okay, now we didn't do the total yet, so we have to do the total. So it looks like it's working so far. Obviously we want to adjust the decimal points, but it looks like it's working so far. And what we're going to do for total is we can do total equals, and that would obviously be tip plus meal. Okay, and that determines that variable. And we should put variable here when you declare it the first time. Make sure you put the var. But then when you use it a second time, you don't need the var. You could just put total equals, or in this case, what we're going to do it just like this one. Instead of saying total equals, I'm going to copy this and paste it here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say the total text field, the value of that is basically going to be equal to total. So kind of what we did up here. So that should take, here we're adding it together, and then this is where it displays it. So you can even put, displays in tip field. We'll just call these fields. And then this one you could just say displays in total field. Okay, so this should work. It seems like it'll work. We have everything written okay, it looks like it. So we have basically our three variables for meal, tip, and total, and then we're also displaying them into the boxes. So we're going to see what happens here. So I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to go into Chrome. I'll refresh it, and I'll just put it, I've been putting in 1, 2, 3, and I'll calculate a tip here. And this is what's happening so far. It's going 123, and it's getting 24.6, and then it's saying 24.6, 123. Something looks wrong there, and I think what's happening when you see this number being just appended to that number, it means you have a string somewhere. And by string meaning it treats text like words. Even though they're numbers, it treats it like words. So what happened here is we took tip plus meal. So it basically took whatever the value is, 24.6 plus meal. Okay, so we're going to have to troubleshoot this and fix this a little bit. And what that's going to involve, it's going to be going in here, and I'm going to just kind of start with this, and then we'll fix it on the next part of this. But I'm going to go in Chrome. I'm going to go to View Developer, and I'm going to go to Developer Tools. And we're going to take a look at the console down here. And what you could do with the console is you can actually try some things out and see what's happening. You can type things out. Like I can go in here. I know this is the meal field, and I could do meal. Now you might just do semicolon, and if I hit return, it's going to show me the HTML. But if I do meal.value, it should give me the value. And that's important to look at because I could see it's coming. That's a string. It's coming in red and it has quotes around it. It means it's treating that as a string. And you might think, well, it's a string, but somehow it's doing some math there because it's taking that and it's multiplying it and it's getting that. And let's just see what the value of the tip field is. So I'm going to do tip.value. I'll do a semicolon. I'll just see what's returning. And it says 24.6, so it looks like the right value. You know, it did some multiplication, but it's returning it as a string for some reason. Okay, I think when it did it, it treated it as math, but then it converted it back to a string. So then, when we look at total, if I do total.value and I do a semicolon, you can see what's happening. It's doing a string. It's just putting those two things together, 24.6123, and it's lining them up. So we have to kind of adjust this a little bit and try and fix this. So I'm going to do that on the next part of this, but we're gonna have to fix this. So going back to brackets, we see that it's actually working. It's adding things up. It's doing what we want it to work, except we have a problem with strings getting converted, that we need to convert them back to numbers.